This is Jim. Welcome to Silent Sales Machine Radio. I worked really hard on this episode today. I actually interviewed 3 different guests, each individually. And no, I didn't do a wardrobe change each time. It happened to be on different days each time, which was interesting to do as we compiled this episode on the topic of fair price warnings on Amazon. If you're an Amazon seller and you're selling anything that is considered an essential, which is a term that's up for debate. What is essential? What isn't essential? Who knows where that list is? That's something we talk about. But if you're selling these essential items right now, well, price gouging comes into play. What is gouging? Who gets to define what is and isn't gouging? We're going to talk about that today. So these fair price warnings, these gouging issues that some sellers are running into, what are the safe categories to sell in right now where you don't have to worry about this? And the good news is, even if you do get some of these fair price warnings and you have to come up with a POA, which is a plan of action, you can rest assured that 95+% of everybody who's going through this process is coming out successfully with their account intact. Unless you truly are doing something seriously underhanded or illegal, you're going to be just fine. Now, it's taking a little extra time as well right now because Amazon is seeing a lot of cases right now. They're trying to protect themselves. And I'm going to dive into this topic today with 3 different experts. The experts we've chosen are people who work with our community on a regular basis. They've helped students of our Proven Amazon course who have had the misfortune of being temporarily suspended at some point to get their account back. Now, you don't always need to go hire a pro if you're suspended. As we'll learn today, you can quite often handle it yourself. And we're going to talk to 3 experts who can help us navigate this with hopefully the lowest amount of stress possible, the least amount of anxiety possible. Yes, we've gone through a strange time the past couple months. We're on the tail end of it now, in my opinion, but be well informed so that you're not nervous when you hear from Amazon and they say, hey, we need a plan of action. We're thinking about suspending you. Or if you do get suspended, what should you be looking for? What are those red flags to tell you you're heading down the wrong path? Our 3 guests today each have their own services. This is kind of almost consider it an interview process where we're checking out each candidate, spend a little bit of time with them. You can decide which one resonates with you if you ever need these services. Check out their websites and the other resources. That'll all be listed in the show notes at silentjim.com/podcast. If you go to that website, you'll get links to everything we're going to talk about with our 3 guests today. So let's jump into this episode. I'm going to interview them, like I said, one at a time. There's going to be a little bit of overlap on some of the topics, but I thought it would be very valuable for us to get the perspective of 3 professionals who've dealt with combined probably thousands of sellers who are going through that very uncomfortable warnings, fair price warnings, gouging, suspension process. This is one of those episodes too, if you hear of anybody else who's struggling with this issue with Amazon, specifically the fair price warnings, the gouging issues, send them to this episode. To my knowledge, this is going to be the most comprehensive discussion on the topic that you'll find anywhere because we're going to talk to 3 of the best today. Okay, let's jump into the episode. Our first guest is going to be Lesley. You're going to love all 3 of these guys. So Lesley, let me ask you, you're dealing with a lot of sellers who are in this fair price warning, gouging arena with Amazon right now. What are you seeing? Peel back the layers a little bit. You're dealing with a lot of this right now.
It is absolutely crazy. And part of the problem, I think, Amazon, of course, was not expecting this. I mean, why would they be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the past, before this, we would see a few price gouging cases a year, usually around a hurricane and someone, price gouging on bottled water. But besides that, it's just not something you see very often. So Amazon moved really quickly to put these new protocols into place and this new programming and these bots out there to catch people. And frankly, they did a terrible job of implementation. And as an example, I'm very fortunate. I get to work with several extremely large sellers, top 10 sellers, top 50 sellers, lots of them. Every single one of them has had to submit a price gouging appeal, every single one. And then on the other end of the spectrum, lots of small sellers, mid-sized sellers. This one has not discriminated. If you do enough volume, you're going to get warnings for price gouging.
Wow. Okay, so now that we've painted a super bleak picture, let's all change our careers and have a great day, everyone. Uh, no, but tell me, I've kind of kept my ear to the ground on this one, and I've even been dealing with some of my Amazon contacts at corporate in Seattle, even, and like, hey, what is going on here, guys? Uh, I think they're as frustrated about this as we are.
Yes. Yes, and I
To
do have
that a
some
little
very
bit.
positive. Yes, I have some very positive things to say too. So
Oh,
first of
of
all,
course we do. I know we do. I was just kind of, messing with
at
you.
first though, this one did seem really bleak. It really
Yeah.
did.
There for a
Um,
week or so, it was pretty dicey, I got to say, for sure.
Yes. And I think the people who are the most frustrated right now are the executives because they are tasked with having selection on this site. Selection is everything for executives. In
Hmm.
fact, almost any time you're appealing anything, your best chances of success are if you have unique selection. And all of
Hmm.
this unique selection has been taken down off the platform because of price gouging. So they are
Yes.
very frustrated. Also, they don't like hearing from my top 10 sellers, right? And all these guys who have SaaS Core and pay for it and are getting
Hmm.
no help at all because SaaS Core doesn't know how to help them. So they're paying for these strategic account managers several $1,000s a month and getting no help. But what Amazon did do is they created a specific group inside of seller performance and they moved all of this price gouging stuff to that group. And these are some more experienced investigators and people who have dealt with, let's say, emergency kind of problems before, and they've
Hmm.
put it in that group because Amazon was already really stressed on the seller performance level. The
Sure.
India offices have been closed because of COVID.
Right.
And then in Central America, South America, the offices are not all up at full speed.
Like half speed, maybe. Yeah.
Yes, and Seattle is overwhelmed and
Right.
exhausted, and there's mandatory overtime. Everyone is just beside themselves.
Sure.
So the good news is we have not seen many cases where accounts have actually been permanently closed.
Right.
Um,
That's the good news. It can take some
yes,
time to get the good news back.
30 days is their SLA.
Yeah.
And that is not an Amazon standard I have ever seen, where 30
Hmm.
days is the SLA to respond. The other piece of good news is usually they're not suspending, they are asking for the 72-hour POA. So you have three
Right.
days to give them a plan of action.
Right.
And then you continue to sell while they review the plan of action, but it takes them up to 30 days. One of our sellers who's ginormous, who you would know who they are if I said their name, took them 30 days to get a response.
Wow. Yeah. And some of these sellers are moving, you know, $1 million of inventory or more a day. And
Mhm.
shutting down for 3 or 4 days means laying off 20 people. It's just like, cash flow is everything. So I think if it's anything, it's consolation. 99% of this audience isn't, 99.99% of this audience isn't in that category of mega seller.
Right.
But just to know that we're not in this alone. And I don't know if you knew this or not, Lesley, and we're not going to dive off in this direction. I commit other podcast episodes and other content to this, but we're actually developing our own platform right now to help
Right.
with,
I saw that.
because Amazon's basically making it not out of their own choice. I would actually put full blame on the state of California, Florida, and there's a couple other states that have really put the screws to some markets where it just doesn't make financial sense to move certain products to market right now if you're going to sell into those states, which of course Amazon does.
Hmm.
So we're going to sell into the states that don't have insane price gouging laws that make everyone run for the hills. We're going to sell into the other states that still allow you to raise your price if your costs go up. It's called maintaining your margin.
Right.
And so, sellers are nervous as selection drops on Amazon. That impacts their ability to serve the customers well. It's all going to level out eventually, but it's opened up a little window of opportunity for us here to move some of these. We look at it as a service to the people who really need these products. They're willing to pay a couple bucks more. They're not going to lose any sleep over if the price goes up $2. Whereas on Amazon, you would have got suspended. But so I love what you're talking about from a high level, the executives that you have contact with these teams and kind of setting the expectation. Let's kind of go through. I want to ask you like a worst case,
Hmm.
best case scenario. Like if you look at a bell curve of all these, and I'd be curious how many go in that bell curve. How many cases like this have you handled? But what's a worst and best case example? And then kind of what's that typical in the middle, if you would? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely. So the worst case, the good news for your audience is I know a lot of people in your audience, and they are good people trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
These are not people taking shortcuts or trying to get by with something. So the worst case really has been bad actors, people who are price gouging, flat out price gouging.
Right.
No one would argue it when you look at what they're selling, and especially the ones who are price gouging for essentials. We've had clients come in who are price gouging on masks and gloves, and they're the ones who are stuck in purgatory the longest because that's what we're seeing is not permanent suspension, but what we're calling this purgatory, where you're suspended and then you're waiting a month to hear back, right? So that is the worst case. And frankly, I'm not really sure yet what the dispositions of those ultimately will be because we're still early in this. The oldest case I have that's still active right now is only 45 days. So we're not really sure what's going to happen on that. The average person right now caught up in this was not price gouging, or they were allowing a repricer to manage their pricing on essential items. And so they may have crossed over into that price gouging territory.
And they didn't even
That's
know they were selling an essential, odds are. I've heard quite a few of those. It's like, who knew that was an essential? We've got
laundry soap.
something is like, what? How'd that make it into the essentials? Right?
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of that has been bot driven. So there are a lot of mistakes, a lot of false
Mhm.
positives. I got a
Keywords. Yeah, false positives. I love that term. Because what they're getting overwhelmed with, like once we look back a year on this is a year behind us, we're like, the bots caused a lot of false positives and we were really all on the same page, but just overwhelmed their ability to, on a manual basis, get people back activated. It scared a
yeah.
lot of us and it frustrated them. And like, we just kind of went at each other there for a while, but on the other side, but they had to stay compliant. The last thing they want to do is get
Mhm.
sued by like the state of California. Right.
Exactly. Or prompt more legislation that they can't deal with on a state by state basis.
Yes,
That's too
exactly.
complex. And then to finish answering your question, the best
Best
case
case.
scenario. So we have some sellers who literally did not change their prices. But what here's the huge mistake Amazon made in the beginning. The programming was not just comparing your price to average selling price or MSRP. It was also comparing to other platforms and sometimes comparing a branded product to a generic one. So
That's
like I've
insane.
so I've got a client that sells a lot of supplements that are like the premium supplements out there. So
Mhm.
it was comparing their super premium supplement to like the Nature's Way vitamin C you buy at Walmart for $4. No joke.
Uh,
So we quickly got
the
past
entrepreneur in me is
those.
just like raging right now. I'm smiling
Oh
and
my
pleasant, but
goodness.
oh,
I have a lot of sellers who I do work for who they sell premium soap,
hmm,
and
sure,
their soaps have
great
literally been
example.
compared to the dial soap you get at Walmart for 88
Hmm.
cents. It's comparing it to that.
Yeah,
And so we've had to go back and say this is a premium that people pay for these added ingredients. And then another area of success and early quick success is where someone has been able to demonstrate the increase in their cost of goods sold and their labor. So I have someone who manufactures hand sanitizer and has for a long time. Their cost of alcohol has gone up by 5 times.
oh yeah, alcohol shot up
Hmm.
to the
And
point where some people, well, I mean, I know of many, this is where you saw in the newspaper, many distilleries converted some of their operation to sanitizer because they could make so much more money. They could barely afford to bottle traditional alcohol with price gouging laws in place, especially, but they could go off into the sanitizer world and, hey, a gallon is now $100. Say,
mhm,
that's reasonable because there wasn't much of a baseline. People didn't buy it in the public by the gallon before.
right.
So they were getting into this new arena. Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me a bit. But so you're seeing some of that too, huh?
Right. So when we can demonstrate, and we've actually sent Amazon invoices and said before,
Mm-hmm.
after, those have gotten cleared up quickly and
Mm-hmm.
none of those have failed. They
That's
have all
beautiful. So these are
succeeded
all
the first
best
time.
case scenarios. What was the
Mhm.
timeline on these? Like when I say best case, I'm like, they were back pretty quick.
2 to 4 weeks, but they were not suspended. They were given the opportunity to provide the preemptive plan of action.
The POA,
And
gotcha.
mhm, the downside of those is sometimes, okay, at the beginning of this, Amazon was holding your funds. So when they asked you for that 72 hour, you have 72 hours to provide a plan of action,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll review it later and decide whether to suspend you or not. At the beginning, they were holding people's funds. And so there was no cash flow for 2 to 4 weeks. Now they're not holding the funds. So that's a good thing.
As of when?
I think it started happening about 10 days ago.
Okay.
From the accounts that we've seen, that they're still getting disbursement.
Sometime around the beginning of May, they flipped a switch and they started doing disbursements even during that POA request period.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful, because I'm kind of seeing ancillary evidence of what you're neck deep in every day, and that helps me out a lot, because we're a shoulder to cry on for a lot of people, but you guys actually provide the services, and we'll give you a chance here towards the end of this to tell people how they can get a hold of you and work with you and your team and help navigate these when they need you, that sort of thing. But what questions should I be asking? What information should sellers know that we haven't hit yet? I feel like we've kind of painted a picture of what the
Mm-hmm.
landscape looks like, but how can we avoid needing you to begin with? Or what are some things that you're seeing if I have to put a POA together myself? What should go into it? Hit on some of those issues that you think are important.
So, on price gouging in general, if you've never had to sell soap to make a living, if you've never had to sell masks to make a living, really assess what your personal risk tolerance is right now. If you have super high risk tolerance and you can get a great deal on a truckload of hand sanitizer and you want to do it, go for it. But if you are the average seller who really wants to make a living off of their account, now
Right.
is not the time to sell soap or other essentials. I actually sell soap, and I have deleted all of my soap listings for right now because it is not
Interesting.
worth it to me.
You deleted them.
I deleted them because they will get swept up by the bots.
Was it a POA or was it a proactive delete?
No, proactively, I
Okay.
saw all of this soap because I sell premium soap.
Right.
And I saw all these premium soaps getting hit, and I
Getting
deleted my
hammered.
soaps. I would
Yeah.
rather sell them in July.
Yeah.
I can hold them for a couple of months and relist them. I don't want to
Sure.
go there right now.
Or
So
sell them on
that's
your own. That's why our
right.
own platform,
Yes.
familyfacemask.com. I mean, that's
Yes.
why that business exploded, because we didn't have to worry as
Mhm.
much. Let's say a state attorney general comes after us and goes, "Hey, you're gouging." We're like, "Nope, here's our costs. Here's our markup. We're one of the lowest prices in the industry. We can do that." I'm not as worried about the states.
Mhm.
It's Amazon who's got to be
Yes.
worried about all states at
Right.
all times. So yeah, that's what these third party platforms have popped up. So there's opportunity here. Hey, if you got a lot of your soap, by the way, connect with us after this episode. We'll talk about how we may be able to do some of it, because we don't worry so much about that issue
Right.
on our platform. But okay, yeah, fair point. And now's not the time to probably dive neck deep into to these hot markets on Amazon specifically.
If you're not a wheeler dealer,
Mhm.
then and you're really looking at long term, it is risky. It can create a lot of risk for your account. And if you do have to sell these products, though, if this is what you do cleaning products and essentials and personal care and medicines, turn off your repricer or reconfigure your repricer so that it is not touching your essentials, or change the way your repricer works. There are a lot of people whose repricer is actually based on a percentage of profit that they want, or it's what they
Mhm.
paid times three. Um, when you allow the repricer to do its job, you're essentially letting other sellers determine your price in a way, because it's all based on the market and on
Mhm.
marketplace effects.
Right.
So if everyone starts selling the Tylenol for $40, all of a sudden you're selling the Tylenol for $40. And I know manual pricing is a pain, but right now, if you're selling essentials, you've got to turn off the repricer and you've got to make sure you have min and max prices on everything.
That's good advice. Yeah, real good advice. So, where is the low hanging fruit? I didn't set you up for this question, but I think I could take a stab at it if we can kind of maybe stumble through it together.
Mhm.
But this is a good question for sellers to be asking themselves right now, especially if they're inch deep, mile wide. I'll sell a little bit of anything, everything. What should I be sourcing that I can safely sell at a reasonable margin right now without gouging being an issue? Now, we probably have to put the caveat: gouging. You can be accused of gouging on anything.
Right.
not just essentials. Right now, they're super sensitive on that.
Mhm.
I think it's insane. We could debate the politics and the worldview of it all, right? We're not going to do that. We're just saying to stay safe on Amazon
Mhm.
right now. Are you seeing some low hanging fruit? Who's not getting in trouble right now, but still selling their stuff at a reasonable clip with all these new shoppers online?
Absolutely. Okay, I love beauty, and I love anything in beauty that is replacing a service that people aren't going to have and they're not going to go have, at least
Beautiful.
in
Yeah.
some marketplaces. So, like, people in New York are not going to go, here in Texas, we're going to go get our nails done now. But in New York,
God
not
bless
so
Texas. That's
much.
right. Yeah. Yeah. But
So,
they're all still shut down. Yeah. It's very
yes,
regional, which presents huge opportunities for
it
us as
does.
entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
This
And
regional lockdown here, not here. And
mhm.
that's going to all settle over the next 6 months. But right now, huge opportunity.
I think there's also a lot of opportunity in sports and outdoors.
Yep.
People are spending time with their families. They're not going to do camp or these other activities, or they might not go on a family vacation this year, but they still want to go outside and do some things with the kids. So, are they going to be buying backpacks? Or are they going to be buying Foursquare sets and badminton sets and sports balls? And I think there's a lot of opportunity there as well. You just have to get creative. And then we've all talked about the baby boom that will probably occur sometime about 7 months from now. I mean, I think it's a great time to source baby items. I mean, that's, anytime people are locked inside for a long time, you have the potential for a baby boom, and there's clothes and all kinds of accessories.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing a record number of success stories in our community, and I know you're in there, right, in the Facebook group, if I recall,
Hmm.
aren't you?
Yes.
You'd said, yeah. So you're seeing. I mean, just a day doesn't go by without someone or a handful of someone's for the first time in a lot of cases ever saying, "Holy cow, my business is exploding."
Yes.
Because everyone's shopping online now. So get creative. Pretty much anything that isn't an essential is,
Hmm.
unless it has to do with travel. People aren't buying luggage right now. We actually put up a graphic here a few weeks ago, and an episode maybe 3 or 4 before this one, we shared an infographic that showed, what's hot, what's not right now. And a lot of stuff is doing really, really well. So don't be overly frustrated that you're going to get smacked down. There's a ton of opportunity out there. um, but what else? I like throwing that question at you. You've seen a lot more of this than I have. Again, my question is, what should we be asking right now? What should we be aware of right now? Maybe we haven't covered yet. I want to kind of just throw it back in your court. What are you seeing a lot of? If you could give me like some red flag warnings, don't go there, or
Absolutely.
help me
Absolutely.
out.
So Amazon is giving people warnings in their accounts. And here's something kind of strange to know about. In the past, you would just watch your performance notifications and it would come by
Mhm.
an email if Amazon was unhappy with you for some reason. Now
Right.
it can pop up as a case, and it can pop up in that PPC scorecard that they have for you,
Hmm.
where it has like number of inauthentic complaints and a number, and then you can appeal those. You really do need to log into the account. Don't do it on your phone because you can't see it well. Log into the account on a PC every day and see if anything has popped in, because here's what I'm here to tell you, y'all. They've been making all these changes to the interface, and they have some serious technology fails going on. Some of these warnings are popping in 5 days late. And this goes for price gouging and other things as well. There's a lot of restricted products warnings right now, too, around the masks and the gloves and, anything that makes a claim about killing a virus. So you got to be really careful to watch those, because if you don't address them quickly, they can take your account down. And I've got a lot of clients who just weren't used to looking in those areas. They were just watching their email and depending on their email to tell them seller performance is worried about you.
Hmm.
So that is a huge deal right now, just because Amazon's making all these bizarro changes. And of
Yeah.
course, they never like tell you. They never say, "Hey, sellers, be sure and look in all these places." They just expect you to figure it out. So I'm here to tell you, please log in every day and look in all of those areas.
I know there for a while they were giving you a phone call before they would suspend an account. Do you know if that's
Mhm.
still happening?
It happens for certain appeal types at certain times. So if they're going to give you this opportunity for the 72-hour POA, they will call you. But sometimes if your risk profile is just too rich for Amazon,
Hmm.
they'll just shut it down without calling you.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Good to know. So this team that you alluded to earlier, I like just kind of riffing. You're handling it really well. But this team you mentioned earlier, that's kind of this is all they're doing is the fair price and the gouging.
Mhm.
Uh, are those new hires?
No.
Those are experienced, because I've seen some strange things out of that group that made me think, okay, maybe they're just new. But things like we had one seller in our community that said you need to go through your entire catalog, comparison shop against all major retailers, and make sure you're not charging more on any item than what they'd find at a major retailer as your plan of action. And I was like, I literally smacked my forehead reading the email. Like, there's no way. They sent me a copy paste of this request. Like, I've never seen anything like that. There's no way that's now policy. So
I
is that frustrating to you?
I had to close my eyes while you were talking because my mother told me it is not polite to roll your eyes. And
That's
there I
not
was
typical,
rolling
right?
my
Tell me.
eyes in my head. Okay, they are literally changing the SOPs. For a while, I think it was daily. Now I think it's every few days. They're changing these SOPs. There's no way that people are being trained properly. Amazon standard usually is that an investigator is trained for 2 to 4 weeks to learn a new suspension type. So if they've never done counterfeit before, they're trained for 2 to 4 weeks on counterfeit, for
That's not
example.
happening right now, though.
Oh my goodness, no.
Yeah,
And I think they are literally getting new documents every day. And frankly, Amazon, a lot of what they do, they run on like chewing gum and paper clips. They don't have some beautiful portal that they sign into and it says, "Oh, here's all the news for the day and here's your new
sure.
SOPs." No, it's not like that. So there is some nonsense definitely being
But
sent
that
out.
you'd consider that an outlier. You see a lot of cases.
It's
When I
it's
saw, but surely this isn't policy, because if that's policy, you should rename it the "Let's get rid of half of our sellers tomorrow" policy. Because like
if you make
there's
that
no
policy, how about Amazon is violating federal law by trying to set
price fixing.
prices policy? Yes.
They're asking at that point. They are literally asking for a class action lawsuit, which you
Hmm.
know, I'd be the last guy to sign on to one. But that's nuts. So, okay, I'm glad to hear you say it. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, that is an anomaly. But that's the chaos that we're kind of operating in. And order will emerge. Clear thinking minds will put things back in order soon enough. I know these people. I know you do as well, Lesley. I've talked with a lot of them. I've been to Seattle. I've sat across the desk from people in these departments that, you can bring them to tears. You say, this old lady who this is her life and she's trained and
Hmm.
she's finally got and then like boom, and she's like this close to losing her house because of a misunderstanding. Like, they get it. It hits them in the heart too. They understand, but they're just so overwhelmed right now.
They are.
So I would encourage people, and maybe hopefully you see it this way as well, Lesley, but we're on the same side. Amazon sellers, we really are on the same side. We're kind of beating each other up a little bit right now, but it could be a lot worse, and we're on the same side. I think that perspective helps. I mean, what's your perception of, these are real people with real feelings on the other side of these POAs that are reading them and making decisions, right? Help us to understand these people a little bit, if you would.
I think they really are, especially right now, doing the best they can. It's a terrible situation they're in. I think the executives do feel that push pull between you have to not allow price gouging, but then we can't price fix. And they saw that they are really quickly moving over into price fixing land, which is a problem not just for class action lawsuit, but that's also legally a problem, violation of federal law and state law and everything else. So they recognize these issues. The day-to-day investigators, I'm very fortunate. 8 of my team members are prior Amazon team
Mm,
members who worked in seller performance, account health, seller support.
they get
And
it.
they are salt of the earth, great people. They have friends who work there. They want sellers to succeed. They really do. Um, if there's ever a time that this is true, it's not business, or I'm sorry, it's not personal, it's business. That is how they see this for real. They see this as risk management. To them,
Hmm.
risk management, they are not looking at you as an account and a person, they're looking at you as a risk factor. And
Sure,
that sounds really painful and cold, but it's what they have to do to comply with federal law. It's what they
sure.
have to do to protect their buyers and to protect the buyer experience and their amazing platform that, let's face it, is better than anything else on planet Earth.
Yeah, it's an
So,
awesome opportunity in
yes,
spite of all this.
It really is. And I always try and get that across to sellers too. I could tell Amazon horror stories literally for 80 hours without stopping because it's what I do all day long. But for the most part, we get it fixed. As long as you're a good guy and you're really trying to act on the up and up, we can almost always get it fixed. There are outliers where there are good guys who end up in a bad situation and we can't. And I think that's just a numbers game and it's going to happen. But Amazon wants to do the right thing for sellers. They do. Sellers make up half of their revenue. They have
Right.
to.
Third-party sellers are a big chunk of change for their whole product. Yeah, I've had conversations with execs. I got to be a senior vice president, Lesley, and he asked, what changes would you make around here if you were in charge? It was an awesome conversation. But one of the things he said that I've always held on to was he said, you guys, referring to third-party sellers, are so much better at stocking our shelves and taking on that risk and figuring out a way to make money on stuff that we just can't figure out how to make money on it. We want to
Mhm.
let you do what you do. We're not in that game because all these rumors pop up like, oh, Amazon's paying attention to what you're selling and they're going to create a brand and knock you out. Like, they're not going to create 10 million brands and try to go after everybody. It's not going to happen. Some of the low hanging fruit, yeah, paper towels, whatever, they're going to get into some of those niche markets, those, you know, essentials, if you will, home essentials
Right.
during a non-crisis period of time, the stuff we call essentials. They're in a few of those markets. But for the most part, they love the third-party marketplace. We have plenty of evidence of that. And if you don't believe me, just look at all the thousands of people who are succeeding on their platform. Just in our community alone, listeners to this podcast. So let that be the evidence. Well, I need to start wrapping this episode up, and I want to make sure that I give you plenty of time to tell us who should call you, when should they call you, and what services you provide, so that we can hopefully connect some people and help save the day on some stressed out sellers today that might find themselves in a tough situation.
Absolutely. So we help people to get their accounts reinstated and their ASINs reinstated. And one thing that our clients love about us is we always answer the phone. There's always someone there who's going to pick up and talk to you and go over the situation to see if we're the right resource. And if we're not, we love to refer you to someone else who is. We also have monthly services for people who we monitor their account on a daily basis. And if they have a lot of ASIN issues pop up or warnings, we just take care of that for them and keep them out of trouble, which is a great thing. Now, I know a lot of people, especially the smaller businesses, they need to try and appeal themselves the first time if they're in a cash flow crunch, and that's totally reasonable. When you really need to get help is if you are overwhelmed and have no idea where to start, then don't ask Amazon questions and say, what do you want me to do? Or what are you looking for? Because they will just block you. If you are very emotional about the situation, like super angry or super crying, and that happens, and that's okay. But if you're out of control emotionally, don't write your appeal. Or if you do, have multiple people review it for you, because that is a recipe for disaster with Amazon. You have to be cool, calm, and collected in the appeal. You
Hmm.
have to admit you're
Great
wrong,
advice.
even if you're not. You have to
Admit your
admit you
fault.
were wrong
Yeah,
or
you are
find
guilty.
something. Yeah, you've got to find something to admit, seriously.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
if you are stuck in an endless loop, so let's say you appealed, you wrote a good appeal, and they keep asking you for more information over and over, don't keep writing appeals, hire someone, because you're getting closer and closer to that block that you really don't want, because then life gets harder. So, you small folks, mom and pop out there, totally get it. A lot of folks appeal the first time themselves, but if you get in that loop, it's time to hire somebody.
Hmm.
So that's what we're here for, and we do consult calls for free. So just give us a shout. You can go to our website. It's riverbendconsulting.com, and there's a form to enter your information or a phone number to call, and we would love to just chat about it. No pressure.
Awesome. Well, that's beautiful. And that takes us to the end of the time that I have, although I think we could go on and on. I'm going to have you back and talk about this. Has been a fun topic. I guess fun is not the right word, but it's been a very informative topic. But there's all kinds of other stuff I know that we could talk about because you guys see a little bit of everything and you're doing a
Hmm.
great work. You and the other guests that we've had on this episode have, from my vantage point, have got the strongest reputations in the industry of helping sellers get their accounts back and reinstatements and POAs and all of those fun things. Let me ask you one final question.
Mhm.
Is there ever a truly hopeless situation where like, no, you're not getting back on it's time to go find a partner. It's time to find another creative way. Do you have anyone that you've had to say, sorry, game over? How often does that happen?
It's very rare. It's usually fraud when it really was fraud, or counterfeit when it really was counterfeit on purpose.
Hmm.
Um, Accidental counterfeit, we've gotten that back. Frauded
Right.
accounts where you can't even log in, but you didn't do it, we've gotten them back too. It's
Beautiful.
the truly bad actors that we say, I'm sorry, I can't take your money because it would be unethical.
Yeah. So there's always a path forward unless you're one of the crooks out there. And crooks and scammers, we don't want you listening to this podcast anyway. So everyone listening, there's always a path forward. It may take a little bit of time right now, but Lesley did a tremendous job of painting a beautiful landscape of what's going on out there, what the possibilities are. And I really think that we're on the tail end of this chaos. I think we're figuring it out as sellers and Amazon, and more people are able to work now, and things are going in the right direction from my vantage point. So this is a very timely episode that you helped us put together here, Lesley. Thank you for being the guest. And to all the listeners, we got a lot more for you. So God bless you. We'll be back with you again real soon. So that was Lesley. She did an awesome job, was a great guest. Next, we're going to talk to Scott, who's also been doing fair price warning and gouging, plans of actions for sellers who are dealing with these issues. He's been doing it for a long time, has a great reputation. You're going to enjoy this conversation with him. And then after him, we've got one more. So hang in there. You're going to be very educated on this topic as you hang with us today. So, Scott, tell me, how could sellers, Amazon sellers, prevent those dreaded fair price warnings and these gouging issues, the dreaded plan of action? Like, how can we be in prevention mode?
I think if you're paying attention to the warnings as they come through and doing that on a regular basis, staying on top of them, that's really important. So you want to make sure that you're responding to all the warnings. And then one mistake I've seen a lot of clients making is they'll go in immediately and delete all of the listings that are associated, and you don't want to do that. When you delete the listing as an immediate response, one of the things that does is it makes it really difficult to adjust your pricing. So you certainly want to go in and adjust your pricing, but the best practice would be to close your listing as opposed to delete it. One of the other things you want to do is you are best off if you can adjust all of your pricing via a flat file upload. And that way you have a case ID associated with the adjusted pricing that you can cite later on if need be in a plan of action.
Very good. Wait, and that's great advice. What categories are you advising, if any, people stay away from right now or be extra cautious about? Because you're handling a lot of these suspended seller issues.
Right.
Trends are you seeing?
The biggest ones would be the items that you would expect Amazon to be paying special attention to right now. So if that includes things that are in health and beauty, but in particular like soaps and items that people are using for cleaning or sanitizing, anything that has keywords associated in it, the bots pick up a lot of keywords that could easily be part of a different type of product that they might not should be focused on. But for instance, like as an example, masks. Obviously, not all masks are associated with breathing or protecting your ability to breathe or preventing some sort of a inhalation of something that you don't want. Sometimes it's different. Maybe it's dust, or maybe it's a Halloween mask, or maybe it's a
Right.
CPAP mask, or I've seen
Sure.
a lot of false positives also. But certainly for sanitizer, certainly for any PPE, certainly for things that would be known like for Clorox types of products, all those kinds of things you would want to pay special attention to. But one other thing that I think sellers miss out a lot on noticing and paying attention to is if you go through all of your existing inventory that you're no longer selling. You should be doing that on a regular basis anyway, but especially right now, why would you want to have that sitting as a time bomb in your account where you're no longer selling that product and you have no intention of replenishing? you might as well go ahead and close those listings.
Not delete, but close.
Yeah,
Right. Beautiful. So, at what point would you suggest? And I know this feels a little random, this question in the order we're going in, but people are
sure.
kind of, these are the most popular questions people are asking us right now.
Right.
Uh, at what point would I need a pro like you to help with a plan of action if requested from Amazon, or with a suspension issue? What can I handle on my own? And at what point is it time to call Scott?
Right. I normally would encourage you to do everything you can on your own up until the point of getting rejected from your first plan of action. So if you want to take a stab at your first plan of action, I feel like that's fair and appropriate and wouldn't want to discourage you from doing that. But by the time you get your first rejection, and certainly your second one, it's time to call somebody in.
And speaking of plan of action, you know, give me a crash course. And if I'm going to do that one myself, are there any
Yeah,
magic words to avoid or that I should include? One of the tips, for example, that I've often heard is don't get emotional. Don't write your life story 8 paragraphs and talk about how your kid needs diapers. That doesn't go in your plan of action. You know,
sure.
Give us a few list basic bullet pointers on how to write a good one if we're going to take a stab at it ourselves on that first round.
That's a great question. In fact, I'm planning on putting out more and more material to help sellers with this kind of thing, because I think every seller is going to get sick at some point. Everybody's going to experience at some point in time, no matter what you're selling, even if you're a private label seller, you're going to have a situation where you have to respond to seller performance with a plan of action, whether or not it's for an ASIN or whether it's an account suspension. You've got to be equipped with the resources to be able to respond adequately. And so, for that reason and many others, I strongly encourage sellers to be better prepared to be able to respond adequately. It's a normal thing. It doesn't make sense to continue every single time that you need an expert to pay and pay and pay,
Sure.
when you can do a lot of that work on your own if you have a understanding of what Amazon's looking for. And so, in terms of plan of action, some of the things that I think about is, well, what a plan of action is not, right? You aren't just making up an apology or saying you're sorry simply to be able to check a box, hoping that you can get Amazon to reinstate you or to reinstate your ASIN so that you can sell it again. And I feel like that mindset is a wrong approach, and it's not going to get you where you need to be in the long run if you're a serious seller and wanting to run a healthy account long term. And so I think that the better mindset is actually to figure out exactly what the problem is. Amazon gave you a performance notification either in your account health dashboard or in your performance notifications or via email. And it's your job to look at that and find out exactly what they think is wrong. And then before you start to write anything, before you do any kind of panicking, you've got to figure out exactly how that problem came about, where you would find that in your account, and then you've got to begin to fix it. In fact, I would encourage you to go through all the steps to fix that problem before you even begin to write. And so the first part of the plan of action, in order for it to be effective, is you've got to identify root cause and then say what you've done to fix it shortly after that. Root cause needs to be succinct. I think you could normally cover that in a paragraph. It depends how many ASINs you're being cited for. And so after you've established root cause and are quite confident about what it is, and it's a real problem, very difficult for anyone, even professionals, to be able to adequately address root cause if you don't know exactly what the problem is.
Well,
So
and
you want to be
speaking
pretty sure
specifically
of it.
about fair price warnings, though, here.
Yeah, I understand, but it's the same across any type of
Okay.
complaint, right? It's like whether it's an inauthentic, whether it's an IP complaint, whatever the problem is that you're going to be, you're up at bat. It's your opportunity to be able to explain to Amazon what the problem is, right? And so for a fair pricing warning, you're going to want to be familiar with the fair pricing policy. You're going to want to mention the marketplace fair pricing policy somewhere in your plan of action, that you're familiar with it. and that you have gone through the steps in order to become compliant. And so you've got to identify, okay, you've been notified of these ASINs. Why were you in violation? How did you come to be in violation? And then shortly after you address the root cause, you want to be able to say, well, what I've done to fix it. One of the things that you want to do is be able to say that you have adjusted your pricing. You want to have, if you're using a repricer, you want to have your min and max pricing set appropriately. You don't want to be over 10% above MAP or the fair market value. And so the thing that you want to keep in mind in the course of all of this as you write your plan is you want to be very clear and very concise. I keep a lot of my plans of action to one page if possible. Sometimes I go to 2 pages and hardly ever go beyond 2 pages. In fact, since I've been doing this since 2014, I could count on maybe 2 hands the number of times I've gone more than 2 pages. So that's something to keep in mind, especially when it's something as focused as like the fair pricing policy and price gouging.
Do you find that being contrite and apologetic helps, even if you're not in the wrong? And I'll give you a specific example. We have people who have had a product at the same price for months or years.
Right.
And out of the blue, suddenly it's price gouging. Fair
Right.
price warning. Your prices are out of line. They can buy this product cheaper at Walmart. And you're like, I've been selling it for this price for 2 years. We have specific examples like that. It's an extreme example, maybe, but
I don't
they're
think it's
really putting the
extreme.
screws to us. So do you admit fault and you go in contrite and you've lost already because you've been accused, or can you push back against it? What's your experience?
I can't remember more than a few times, maybe 5 grand total times in the past 6 years where we've pushed back and had it be successful.
Wow.
Um, and
Wow.
so
With
sometimes it does
probably a
merit
couple
pushback.
thousand cases managed, if I'm at least.
Easily. And I mean, sometimes that's my initial response. It's like I'm listening to you as a client, and I get indignant on your behalf because of the things that I see that you're experiencing that are completely unfair, that you're caught up in, and in fact, you did nothing wrong. That's a difficult situation, but I still, that's one of the reasons that you're paying a professional is for us to be able to step back and see the situation for what it is.
Remove the emotion.
Compassionate. Exactly. If you're emotional, I saw this with a business partner the other day. He was very upset with somebody that he was working with, and he responded to me with the emotion that he wanted to be able to express to them, and it didn't go well. I had to call him on it, right? And it's like, well, he accepted that and understood it, but it's something that you've got to understand in every situation. You don't let the sun go down on your anger in terms of if you've got a disagreement with your spouse or whatever, right? It never goes well if it's in the heat of the moment, and you don't want to respond to Amazon in the heat of the moment either.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, you've got to reduce the situation down to a number. I've talked many people off. I like that word, indignant. They're just totally emotionally vested in the outcome that they want, and then you find out, well, they've only got 5 units of this ASIN, and they were going to make $28 if it went their way, as opposed to $10 if it doesn't. I'm like, really? You're going to go to war for this? Reduce it down to a number.
Yeah.
And this is why we teach also, you've got to be diversified, because at some point, I like what you said, we're all probably going to face the heat, probably going to have to come up with a plan of action. But like we always say, and let's see if this still holds consistent with you, Scott. I've been saying this for years, and I'm bouncing this off some of our other experts too. About 95% of the time, when you're called to the principal's office with Amazon, it's going to be okay, right? And unless you've done something just egregious and you know it, and you've tried to sell products that you just don't have, for example, right? Or you've tried to set up multiple seller accounts and you've kind of thumbed your nose or flipped them the bird and like at the process. But if you know that you're walking a borderline, it was a gray area, you got called out on it, you're going to fix it. Here's my plan of action. I'm sorry, I won't let it happen again. 95% of the time you get your account back. It could take some time, but is that number still accurate? Let's go there first.
I would quote the same number, actually. I feel like, in fact, that's my track record, right? So I'm at least 95% of the time successful and better, right?
Beautiful.
But what's important to keep in mind is that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get back, and that number plummets dramatically if it's a second suspension or third suspension.
Second, third.
Second, third. I've gotten people back from fourth suspensions, but you don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to hold my breath for you, right?
They're keeping track. That's right.
It's a difficult situation. You certainly are putting your relationship at stress to the point where they don't trust you anymore. And
what percent of the suspensions right now are fair price warning and gouging is coming across your desk?
I don't know that it's fair for me to quote a number on that because I only see what I see, right? I see a portion of the total number of suspensions, but it's pretty small, right? And I think it has a lot to do with the other things going on in your account. So for them to just sort of pull the trigger and suspend you for price gouging, normally it's a newer seller or someone who has not been on the platform for a long time. I saw a seller that's been on the platform for 6 years suspended the other day. They had never had trouble before of any kind, but it wasn't just about price gouging. They also had a number of other performance notifications that they had not responded to, and that's a big problem. You've got to respond to performance notifications. You can't just ignore them and expect them to go away.
Understood. Have you seen any of these cases where sellers are expected to match the prices of retail stores come across your desk?
It's an important point and one that needs to go in your plan of action. One of the things that that Amazon wants to know that you're doing as a seller is comparing your prices to other platforms. So you also want to mention that you're actively and regularly monitoring the price for these types of products on other platforms like Walmart and eBay and Target and whatever else might be appropriate. Because if you're not doing that, how can you possibly know if your price is fair?
Right. And, not to dive into the weeds of that debate, but probably one of my least favorite English words is fair.
Yeah.
Because it's literally undefinable, right? Just from the vantage point of, just taking my wife, for example, if she knows that Benadryl's $6 at Walmart, but we don't want to get in the car right now, put on our masks and go to the Walmart and walk around, we'll gladly pay someone $10 on Amazon. Right.
Yeah.
But Amazon with these policies, we'll pay we'll pay a 40, 80% markup, without hesitation. And millions of shoppers feel the same way. But yet sellers are being asked, and I'm not beating you up right now. This is kind of the system is kind of a little broke from this vantage point. A lot of sellers with a lot of ASINs are being told to sell it at the same price, although there's a lot of extra added convenience for the consumers.
Right. You just can't confuse logic and reason with the rules that you're being asked to abide by.
Exactly.
So
thanks for allowing me to vent a little bit there, but and that's one of the reasons, Scott, I haven't filled you in on it, but one of the things we're doing right now is launching our own platform specifically for essential items.
Yeah.
And we're not going to sell into the states that have the most restrictive price gouging laws.
Yeah,
we're going to sell into the states that recognize margins go up, so margins stay steady when costs go up. Some states don't recognize that. The state of California does not recognize, for example, that if your costs double, they don't care. You're not allowed to raise your price more than 10%. Never mind that you can't even produce the product. Right?
It's not based in reality for them to not consider the cost of goods are increasing.
Exactly.
The cost right now to buy a mask is higher than what it used to be at retail. It's just
the price of production. The price of production has shot up dramatically. Supply and demand, and you have to pay a lot more money to get people to go to work right now. You don't have to look far to find articles. People would rather be at home and get that check than go to work. So they're having to say, "Hey, we'll give you $5 more an hour if you'll come to work." Those costs go into the price of the goods. So the price of the goods go up, but Amazon's saying, no, you got to hold your price steady because California says no more than a 10% price increase. So we're getting squeezed as the resellers right now. We're getting squeezed, which is why we're launching our own platform. But I want to be very realistic. You've got to play the game by Amazon's rules right now. You can't go to battle and give them you can't get up on your what's the word I'm looking for, on your
high horse.
What's that?
Your high horse.
High horse, or there's another better word for it. Someone's just saying it to the podcast right now. But you jump up and you're like, "Hey, Amazon, your rules are terrible. Here's why. That doesn't go into your plan of action. It's
Well,
going to get
part of your
rejected.
game plan as a seller needs to be to account for this discrepancy between reality versus what they want of you. And
That's
if,
right.
every single time you get notified of something that's absolutely crazy, you can't get all upset about it and respond inappropriately. Your job is to be systematic and to look at the long game. I mean, your account is your golden goose, and you've got to protect it, and you've got to keep it healthy. And you've got to weigh the risks of taking advantage of a situation like this, when I just don't think it's worth it in the long term. You
Yeah.
might make a few extra thousand or 100,000 or whatever right now, but if you lose your account, it's not worth it.
Yeah. And soapbox is the word I was looking for.
Uh,
And there are millions of other products you could be selling besides the one that you think is your bread and butter, and you're gonna fight to the death and claw tooth and nail and get Amazon to change their policies. No, you're not. So I think that's one of the stronger themes that's coming out here is you got to play by the rules. I find myself convincing sellers that, yeah, apologize. Say, yeah, I was in the wrong. I was in the wrong. Even if you're selling a product at a loss, to play the game, you got to say, yep, I was in the wrong. I was gouging. I apologize. It'll never happen again. Here's my plan. I've compared my prices to all these other retail stores. Then you move on and you maybe drift
Pretty
away from that
much.
product if you have to.
Yeah,
Right? And this
I
is
definitely would
temporary.
agree with that.
This is temporary. This is a game we have to play. Thank God. I mean, we're going to get through this and it's going to be back to normal, hopefully, as far as Amazon and pricing and gouging will be a distant memory. But for right now, this is an issue that a lot of people are having to deal with. And when I say a lot, I mean, we're seeing in our community, I hear 5 or 6 people a week, tens of thousands of sellers, and I'm hearing 5 or 6 people a week saying, "Yeah, I got a temporary suspension. How long is it going to take?" Which is my next question for you, by the
Yeah.
way. So I think the odds are still with you. If you're keeping an eye on your margins, just don't raise anything that's in the essential categories more than 10%, and you're going to get through this. But how long does it take right now? There's a bit of a bottleneck, it seems to me, to get
I,
people cleared.
I would agree. We never tell people an exact timeline because it's impossible to do so. There's no way to guarantee that someone's going to get back in a certain period of time. And so at one point, I had 6 different accounts that all showed up at the same time, and 5 of them were back within some in a week, some in 2 weeks. But then there's a sixth that's still suspended and shouldn't be. There's no reason why he shouldn't have been able to get back on. And I can't tell you why he hasn't, but it's time to escalate that.
Well, here's my last question, Scott. I mean, I could talk about this all day, but we've got a couple other experts on this episode today. So I'm going to bounce around some of these same ideas and a few other ones with them as well. But
Sure.
I don't want to let you get away before I find out how our listeners can get a hold of you. They want to hire a pro and what you bring to the game. This is your chance. Brag on yourself a little bit. Talk about what you've done, how many cases you've handled, that sort of thing. You're one of our most trusted partners in this arena. So I just wanted to give you a little chance to uh, basically toot your own horn for a second, man, and tell people what point they should call you and how they find you.
Sure. So one thing to know is there's no obligation, there's no cost just to have a conversation, and I think that's important for you to know. You don't have to have trepidation about picking up the phone or scheduling a call or sending an email. You can get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger, and the website is eCom Seller Tools with one M as in Mary, Seller SELLER Tools TOOLS.com. So you can reach me there. You can reach me on Facebook. It's email scott@ecomsellertools.com. I've been in this since 2014, consulting full time, and like many of you, a seller for several years before that. And so I understand what it's like to experience the pain of selling and to experience the pain of dealing with a situation where you might not really be at fault. And as you mentioned before, you like to say, hey, maybe it's important to be contrite, but you want to take responsibility. Amazon wants to know that whatever it is that they're alerting you about, that it's something that you've taken seriously and that you're accountable and that you're taking responsibility for it before you just apologize. You're not apologizing and saying, I'm sorry, just to be able to get what you want, which is back on. You want to make sure that you've fixed whatever the problem is, and then you want to be able to tell them what you've done to fix it. So we've been successful with that for years now. And again, as far as when's the right time to get a hold of a pro, it's really after you've, if you want to, it can be before you've done anything, but certainly after you've received your first or second rejection.
Understood. Well, that's fantastic. And those links will all be in the show notes as well for those of you
Excellent.
who are listening while driving and didn't have chance to take notes, write down Scott's info. We'll have in the show notes at silentjim.com/podcast. Just scroll to the notes for this episode and you can check out Scott's work and his website and give him a call if you need him. And I think the favorite part of this episode so far for me today, for this conversation with you, Scott, was that magical 95% number. It's going to be okay. Odds are very strong in your favor. It's going to be okay.
Don't panic.
Just you got to play the game by their rules.
Yeah.
Right. There's always a way forward, though, and I love providing creative solutions for sellers. So you can go to bed at night and sleep well, knowing that you've got a viable business that's still going to be here, and there's always creative ways forward, no matter what you're facing. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with us today, Scott. Really appreciate you, man. Hope to see you soon, buddy. We're going to have another live event one of these days, and I know you've been to some of them in the past. We're looking forward to doing that again, and hopefully you can make it to one of those again with us.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for your time, buddy. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Okay, sounds good. Take care.
Okay, that was Scott. He did a great job. It was cool hanging out with him for a while and getting his perspective on this issue. Next up, I'm excited to bring you our final guest, which is Cynthia. She's probably been working with our community longer than anyone on suspensions and reinstatements. She's been doing this for a long time. She's got a lot of experience in the industry and one of the originals who offered these services as far back as I can remember. So our final guest today on this issue, and again, I'll remind you, there might be a little overlap here, but there's new content and new information and new ideas to be gained from each of these speakers. That's why I talked to each of them, and we tried to mix the questioning up a little bit for you so we could get a great perspective across the board. And again, you're getting to know these folks. You might be working with one of them or their teams at some point. So kind of get a feel for which one resonates with you and where you're coming from. And again, you can contact any of them for pricing or further information, of course, as well. But next up, like I said, let's meet Cynthia. She did a great job with us as well. And that'll be our final guest for this episode. Okay, so Cynthia, thanks for being on the show today. And let's just get right into it. What tips would you have for sellers who are either trying to avoid these fair price warning issues or who are already kind of involved in them? Just talk us through a little bit from your perspective.
Well, first of all, I want to tell people about the fair price issues is that most of them are resolved. So it's scary to get an announcement and to have an ASIN or even your account suspended, but we're getting everyone back so far, except for the people who truly were price gouging. And of course, people would rather avoid that. Like you said, they would rather not have to go through the stomach churning experience of trying to resolve this with Amazon. And one of the things that I tell people is to look at the strictest state. Like California is a very strict state. To look at their rules about, price gouging, because, Amazon calls it its fair pricing policy, but they're talking about price gouging, and to look at what their requirements are and what they consider price gouging, and also in particular look at what is an essential item, because there are essential items that people are just not even aware are essential. Like we've seen quite a few of those where somebody who's selling, I don't know, hardware or wood stuff with wood in it or plywood or and they're finding their items taken down and they're like, what? And so
what's the best way to find it out
really
if your item's an essential item? What is there a list? I hadn't of specific products.
Amazon does not have a list. The list, you have to look at the states. And that's why I said, look at like one of the strictest states. Like I look at California and Florida. Those are the two that, they have a lot of natural disasters and they have their rules down. And look at what they consider essential, because it's way beyond the obvious of soap and, stuff like that. And then also look at their rules about it. So what they usually say is anything that's more than 10% above normal retail is price gouging. So, if an item is $5 before the crisis and you're now selling it for, $7, you're price gouging, right? And so people may not even realize that. And so the first step is to identify your items that would be considered essential. And then 2 is to make sure your repricer is set in such a way that you cannot go over a max. So you might say, X percent over retail is X, maybe it's $7, and I won't go above $7. So your repricer won't get you in trouble. Because we've had that happen before where, it wasn't intentional at all, but people's repricers, as other sellers sold out, their repricers went, yay, and they went up and up, and it was automatic and the seller wasn't even aware.
Yeah.
So those are the two.
We've seen that happening with Amazon actually too. They have a lot of their pricing set on automatic adjust. I'm assuming,
yes.
Because you see sellers getting shut down for gouging at a price that's lower than what Amazon's selling the same product for. And, we've run into quite a few examples of that. And it's been frustrating for sure. And again,
I'll
this
tell
episode...
you why that's happening.
Go ahead.
I can tell you why that's happening.
Yeah.
So obviously there are things that have gone up in price because of the crisis. Either, the raw materials are more expensive, it costs more to ship it, whatever it is. And for certain essential items, people might be air shipping them from China, right? Where they would usually do it by container ship. So there are costs that do and have gone up. And basically with the state, if you can show that your price is reasonable and that your costs went up, then they're not going to sue you for price gouging.
That's with
right?
states.
So
states typically, except California and Florida, if you can protect your margins and be just fine. But with California, it's 10%.
It
as written in the law.
Yeah, but if you look at the fine print, they do make some allowances for if you can prove that your expenses have genuinely gone up. Like, think about when we had the tariffs on steel, right? The price of steel went up, right? And so if you were selling an essential item that was made out of steel or had a steel component, you could show, well, my costs went up because of the tariffs. And but that's the thing. You have to be ready to prove it. And, and so one thing I tell people is don't just raise your prices because everybody else might be, because that happens. Again, people start raising their price. They kind of get away with it. They raise their price. And there might be a whole group of sellers. Like one of my clients who had his listing suspended was the lowest price seller on a listing. And the price on the product had only got up like $4. It didn't matter. And so I said, well, feel comfort in the fact that everyone was taken down, not just you.
Right. Right.
And so
and I don't know that we can tackle in this episode, just to keep us on track with what, the intention of this would be, is staying compliant with Amazon. We're not going to drift into how do you deal with it if you hear from the state attorney of Florida, attorney general of Florida.
Right.
You're gouging. And I've talked to some, just to put a button on that issue, you're not ignoring it. Basically, if you can demonstrate that your margins have maintained steady, meaning I rose my price because my costs went up, then you're going to be just fine. The bigger concern, the immediate concern right now, especially for the vast majority, 99% of the sellers in our community, is I want to stay off Amazon's radar right now. And if I do find myself on the radar, what do I do? So that, I want to stay in that lane and make sure we don't kind of mesh those two together as the same message. Because it's a very different game staying legal in the state you're in versus keeping your Amazon account. You're on thinner ice with Amazon,
Right.
is my perspective. Way thinner ice.
You are. They act faster. But Amazon is also following the state's guidelines. And so
They're
you have
attempting to implement
understand
that across the board, like because they sell into California. They don't allow you to delineate. That was one of my suggestions I had for them, by the way, Cynthia, was just give us an option to not sell to California and Florida and those other states that have an exact percentage written into their law, and just let us, the free market, determine pricing on the rest of it. They didn't like that idea, I don't think, but because across the board, the cost of everything is going up right now. I mean, literally everything, essential, non-essential, everything. The prices are rising. So we're all kind of playing a game right now with the laws and with Amazon's rules. Plenty of opportunity still, but that's just the reality of what we're seeing because of the virus chaos.
Right. And like I said, again, where a lot of my clients get confused or get into problems is they don't understand that their item is essential. I mean, the obvious, of course, they know hand sanitizer is essential. But there's so many things that they don't realize, whether it's a baby product, even certain toys. I mean, there are certain things that are just essential and that you just wouldn't think of. And so going to the trouble of reading through that boring list is helpful because it might make you think, ooh,
is there a state that has a fairly comprehensive? Would you suggest California and Florida to put together a pretty comprehensive list?
Yeah. And for the most part, their lists are pretty much all the same. So that's what I found when I was reading it. It is boring, but it's helpful because it triggers some thoughts like, And then the other thing people need to understand is Amazon runs everything by algorithm. So you have to start thinking, what are the keywords that might get me, even though, like, for example, when they stopped allowing people to sell masks, right? When they said, okay, you have to be vetted before you can sell N95 masks, there were a bunch of sellers that were taken down that were not selling masks, but the product they were selling, like a tool or something with a part or, a model that had N95 or 95 in it, was taken down. And so they're like, this is not a mask,
Right.
And, we got it straightened up over time. But that makes you think, what would be a keyword that they might use to do a takedown and to try and look at your keywords in your listings too. Like a lot of people found out when the COVID stuff really started, they had listings taken down because they had what I would say, medical type words in them, like disinfect, sanitize, clean, or, almost anything relating to health. Just a ton of stuff was taken down. Stuff that had nothing to do with essential COVID items. And, again, it was because it was all by algorithm keywords.
Right. And Amazon's, in their defense, they're walking along with sellers a pretty thin tightrope right now. They don't want to get sued by the state of California. None of us do. We just want to get through this, okay? And it's sorry I marked my Band-Aids up at $1.50 higher than they were before. Like, I'll bring it back down. We just want to get through this. But at the same time, they're monitoring millions of sellers and tens of millions of listings, and they roll out these algorithms, and it throws out a lot of baby with the bathwater, and that's just part of the game. And right now, everyone's kind of on edge. But the good news is, I love where you started, Cynthia, is the vast majority, unless you were ridiculously over the top gouging, the vast majority of people, what we're hearing is they're getting right back in and they're getting their accounts back. It just takes some time. So maybe that's where I'd like to go next is, and I've asked a few other folks this question too. How much time are you seeing right now if, let's say, you're suspended for fair price warning and they want a plan of action? Two questions. What goes into your plan of action? If you're just going to help me, I'm going to do it myself. I don't necessarily want to hire Cynthia right now. I want to take a stab at this first round. And how much time should I expect that's going to take?
Okay. So the plan of action for fair pricing policy is Amazon basically just wants to see that you understand their fair pricing policy. Like I said, I would say 99% or better of the people they're taking down are not true price gougers, and they know it.
99%,
so
really? That's a true math number for you, not just a number off the top of your head. Like 99 of 100 of us, they know we're not really gouging.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they know it. Because what happened was they took the truly guilty out early on, like the 3,900 that they turned over to the various states attorney generals, right? These were the true bad guys. They were price gouging. These were the really bad guys. Okay. But they know that most of us are not. And so what this exercise is, it's really a cover your exercise on Amazon's part so that they can show the states and other authorities, hey, we take this seriously, and we've been making sure that everyone understands the fair pricing policy and blah blah blah. And so because of that, the POA is actually not that hard. Really, all the seller needs to do is to explain why their price went up. And again, if you have a legitimate reason, like I'm air shipping my goods now and the price went up, you can tell Amazon that, right? They understand that sometimes it's totally legit. If it's more of a case where you just weren't keeping your eye on the ball, or you were pricing along with everybody else and they were wrong too.
Your using an automatic pricer isn't an allowable excuse, I would guess.
It's not an allowable excuse, but it is a reason. And so you can say, this is what happened. I was right in the middle of the pack. I wasn't trying to. And then what you do for the plan of action part, so that's the what happened, the root cause, right?
Right.
And then for the plan of action part, you show them, how you fixed that, right? So you've changed the rules on your repricer. You've identified a list in your inventory of things that are considered essential. And then you've read Amazon's rules about fair pricing policy, and you can just basically barf it back to them because that's what they're looking for. And that usually does the trick. So they have what they want, which is, you understand fair pricing policy, and it's not going to happen again. And you get that pretty quickly. I mean, most of our clients, once they turn in their plan of action, they're usually back in a day or two.
Wow. Okay. Does that have anything to do with using a professional? Because I'm hearing stories of 2 weeks and more.
Well, that's fine. Perhaps it might have the difference between amateur and professional, but I want to make a caveat here that I'm talking about when it's like a listing or a few listings taken down. Account reinstatements are taking longer. And so because they're for an account reinstatement, they just take longer to review them. I don't know why, because it's the same issue. But anyway, but yeah, we defined it. It really depends on, how backed up Amazon is. But for the most part,
I think they're as backed up as they've ever been right now, from what I'm seeing. Because
they
suspended a lot of accounts in our community alone, and they're all coming back. But we're seeing week, 2 weeks. I've seen a few 3 week plus. They're still waiting, and it was 2 or 3 ASINs, and instead of staying at 10%, they went to 18% of a markup or whatever with a repricer. And now they're going back and forth with Amazon on a suspended account with POAs. There's a lot of them out there. I certainly don't want to scare anyone off, but there are a lot of people who are kind of in limbo right now. They all know they're going to get their account back, but when? Is it like when? Please. Yeah.
Well, I'm always mixed feelings about the way Amazon keeps me in business, but it is because of things like this, and it's possible that people are not including everything in the appeal that Amazon wants. I don't know, because for the most part, they're happening pretty fast for us. Okay. Again, with the ones that we find that are taking longer, they're usually more complicated. So there's something else going on that either contributed to the problem or that has to be addressed for them to reinstate. So, but the straight off guys where it's just, hey, you violated our fair pricing policy.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. And I don't know that I've heard anyone answer this before. Let's say it's an item. We teach a lot of inch deep, mile wide. This is one of the 1,500 items or one of the 40 items that I sell. I'm happy to walk away from it, Amazon. I mean, because I've heard this from many sellers. It's unfortunate, but they're price gouging according to Amazon, at a price loss, meaning I'm happy to walk away from this price. I don't know how anyone can sell it at a profit for the price you want me to sell it at, Amazon. I'm happy to walk away.
Right.
Is that an acceptable
Right.
plan of action response? It's, hey, I can no longer make a profit on this item at a price that I'm expected to sell it for. I'm just going to remove it from my inventory.
That's not enough by itself. You can certainly include that in a plan if you want to tell them that's what you're going to do, but that is not, that doesn't address their fundamental issue that they want you to understand what fair pricing policy is and to comply with it across your inventory. So they don't really care on an individual ASIN level whether you sell it or not. That's a business decision for you.
That's good to know.
But yeah, so that's sometimes maybe why people aren't getting back as quickly, because they haven't really addressed and reiterated back to Amazon its fair pricing policy. And that's what Amazon wants to see. It's kind of like being in school where you have to do an essay test and you have to just reiterate what the professor told you, right?
Right.
And
Even if you disagree and think it's fundamentally incorrect and like me, I mean, I'm sure we all vary on our definition of what price gouging is. To me, the word itself is pure insanity, undefinable. That's where I'm at. I don't know. There's other people who are like, no, it serves a very specific purpose in the marketplace, and we can still be friends and disagree. But none of that matters. It's what does the 25-year-old sitting at the keyboard at Amazon, what do they think? Right, we got to make them happy right now. We got to get an A+ from the professor.
They have a checklist. So think of it as a pop quiz, right? They have a checklist. Either you get the right answers or you don't. And that's it. And they decide what the right answers are.
Yeah. So this is not a hill you want to die on if you want to continue selling on Amazon. You're not going to educate them philosophically on the proper thinking of fair price.
Yeah.
So yeah, good stuff.
No, and you're not going to win. And
nope.
And so you just want to sell again. And that's the fastest way to get to it is to, just explain how whatever happened, how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and how now you understand. And like I said, I would say for a large number of our clients, they really didn't realize that what they were selling was essential. So when they got the announcement, they were really surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of them, but some of them were genuinely surprised. And so that's key to know, to look at your inventory and think through, might this be considered essential?
Do you
but then
to
the
have
other thing,
the essential list from California and Florida? That rather than me researching it, do you happen to know where? Is that something that you could provide? I could stick in the show notes, perhaps.
Yeah. Actually, I can send you a link because I included it in a recent blog post.
Beautiful.
So,
and we'll promote that blog post here in a couple minutes as well when we talk about how people can get a hold of you and such. But I have one last question before we start to land this episode or land this segment, I should say. How many people have you helped? I like these two-part questions because you can kind of go where you want with this. How many people have you helped with a plan of action over price gouging? And, how many people have you turned away? Like, you can handle it on your own. I mean, this is, where's that line? When do we need a professional? And how many of them have you done? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. We usually get at least one a day. So, and have for months now.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than that. So I don't know how many, 50, 60, quite a few. And in the very beginning, we got people, the ones who were seriously price gouging and got taken down for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did try for a couple of them because they were current or previous clients. And we were not successful. And that's because Amazon had decided, there was no way they were getting back. Just like, the Colvins are never getting back, right? The poster child for price gouging, Matt Colvin. But we've done a lot of these. And the other part of your question was how many do we turn away?
When do we need to, at what point have I crossed the line and I'm thinking, okay, I need a pro with my price gouging issue? Let's say I took a stab at my first one. What are some indicators that time to call the lawyer almost, right? And from a legal sense, it's
right.
like, where's that line in the sand for you over people who've oh no, you could have handled that yourself versus time to call Cynthia?
Right. A lot of people can handle it themselves. And, and so I think it's worth trying yourself before calling in a professional. And I think where you might say, I really need a professional is like if you're stuck, like you're in, the Amazon hell autoresponder loop and nothing seems to be happening and you don't understand why they're not accepting your appeal or something like that, or they bring up something else that's troubling them, then there might be more going on in your account than just that. Those are times when I would think about, calling in someone like me. And then the other time is if you're someone that just has to get back right away, you cannot waste time on it. That's a good time to hire a professional because, as I told you earlier, we're generally, our people are getting back in 2 to 3 days. And so for certain sellers, high volume sellers where time is money, that they don't even think about doing it themselves, right? They just hire a professional. But otherwise, for a lot of the smaller sellers, they are trying themselves. And, some of them are successful, who follow what we talk about.
Beautiful.
So I think that's probably a first place to start anyway.
Yeah, that's good. And that's fairly consistent with the advice we generally give is take a step, don't get emotional, take a stab at, here's the facts. Make sure you emphasize that you understand the policy. If they accuse you of doing something wrong, don't say, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Say, I'd recognize where I went wrong, even if you disagree philosophically. It's not enough just to delete the item.
I would literally include links back to their policy in your appeal.
Links. Oh, even links to the policy is rather than copy paste the policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't so they
put
can
too
check
much for
that
them to
box.
read.
Yes, this person understands the policy.
Yeah. I read Amazon's policies at this link. I understand now that, my price went up by too much or whatever it is.
Yeah. I was so wrong before. I read the policy. Now I understand.
And I know where the policy is because here's the link.
Got it. Well, let's wrap it up here. I want to hear about what would I spend if I were to give you a call and you were to help me through a typical, I know everyone's kind of different, but just give me a general ballpark. How much is it going to set me back to hire a pro? And you answer that however you'd like. And tell me a little bit more about how people can contact you, where your website is, if they want to take a stab at consuming some of your content and some of these other great like the blog article you wrote, where's that? So take all that and run with it for a couple minutes.
Okay. Well, basically, if you're going to hire a pro and you're dealing with, a few ASINs, you're probably going to spend around $1,200. I really can only speak for myself because I don't know what my competitors are charging.
I'm talking specifically you, of course.
Yeah, but if it's an account, you're going to spend like $2,500. That's pretty consistent among me and my competitors around that price point. And if you need an expedite, that's the people who are like, I have to be back right now. Most of us have expedited, so you can look into that. And you can find me at eGrowthPartners.com. And I do have a blog there, and I am very thorough and detailed in my blogs when I talk about a topic. And so obviously it doesn't cost anything. Please come and read it and sign up. And you can also reach my team at 972-432-6398 or hello@eGrowthPartners.com. I do have a team, so there's somebody who can be there to help you. And we also work 7 days a week, depending on whether you're an expedite or not. But we do provide extended service for people. So, give us a call.
Fantastic. And that blog post you mentioned that has the list of essentials, the links, what's the title of that? Could you just send me a link to that and I'll stick it in the show notes as well, but how could we find it on your website?
I'll send you the link. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I wrote about 3 COVID related blogs, boom, boom, boom. It's in one of those. I will send it to you.
Gotcha. No worries. If people can go back and find it's going to be somewhere in the, March.
Yeah.
March, April,
But I will get
somewhere
it
in
to
there.
you.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like we're kind of through the worst of the bad news as far as Amazon really crushing sellers who are gouging. If you're getting accused at this point, you made it through those early waves of them really putting their foot down hard and fast and heavy on some of the big boys who were really jacking up the prices. They've come down hard on them. Now it's just a matter of kind of getting through the weeds, and it's the inconvenience of it for sure. But you're not seeing a whole lot of people just basically being crushed off the platform at this point, it sounds like, especially over these minor.
Not for fair pricing, because most people who were, the bad guys, they learned their lesson, right? Or they learned from the people who did get taken down. And so we're not seeing as egregious bad behavior on the platform as we were. So again, anybody who gets taken down for serious price gouging and they're surprised, there's something wrong with them. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
So
good. Fair enough.
That's why I said most of my clients are innocent. They didn't understand what Amazon is doing, but they're not out to take advantage of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's one of those issues, and as almost a separate topic, I truly enjoy the debate over what is a fair price, what is gouging, what isn't gouging. Where do we just let the free markets roll, or do we really crank down? If so, on what items? I love that. But the topic here is, how do we keep Amazon happy? Really, our opinions on all those other questions I just mentioned are interesting fodder, of course, and determine our politics and our worldview. But no, it's what does Amazon want? That's all that matters for this discussion. I think we did a pretty good job of nailing down, drilling into that topic today. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're going to stick links to all your stuff that you mentioned in the show notes today at silentgym.com. If you don't have that link yet, that's the only one you need. You'll get all the stuff that Cynthia mentioned today. So do shoot me an email, Cynthia, okay, with all the stuff that you mentioned today. We'll stick it in the show notes. And to all the business building warriors, thanks for joining us for this series, if you will, of experts who can speak into this topic much more thoroughly than I can, because this is what they do all day, every day. So hopefully you're enjoying this. And Cynthia, our guest today, thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate your knowledge and your expertise as always, my friend.
Thank you, Jim.
Talk to you soon. Okay, we've talked about price gouging and suspension and fair price warnings and plans of action. We've talked about it, I think, and we are all experts on this subject now at this point. 3 different experts with pretty similar perspectives on the issue, but each with some unique insights to offer. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Again, I'll remind you, this is a great episode to share with someone who is worried about fair price warnings and gouging, specifically on the Amazon platform. We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the ethics and the worldviews of price gouging and fair price warnings and what it is and isn't. We just talked specifically about how to protect your account and how to get your account back if you're selling on Amazon and you're playing around in the arena of essentials and you want to be careful. So hopefully you got a lot of great info out of these guests. I know I sure did. I feel very educated and informed on this topic now. Reach out to any of them. And I'll remind you, in the show notes at silentgym.com, you can jump over and get links to all 3 guests that we had on the show today, their websites, their contact information, and you can figure out who's right for you in the event that you need the services from one of these great pros that we had on the show today. There's a handful of other companies out there that provide these services. These are the 3 that we're most familiar with, that people in our community have used. They know, like, and trust more than any others that I'm aware of out there. If you've got others, feel free to mention it in the notes. Send us a link. That's cool. Let us know about it. We'll add them to our resource list. But check out the links. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have them right below this for all the resources. Or if you go to silentgym.com and check out this podcast episode show notes, you'll see links to everything that was mentioned today. So good job hanging in there. That was a lot to absorb today, but a very necessary episode for the season we find ourselves in. Hey, God bless you, business building warrior. We've got many other great episodes coming at you very soon, and probably not many with 3 individual guests. That was a lot of work. I know it was a lot to listen to as well, but very good time spent as far as making sure you have the knowledge that you need to navigate where we find ourselves right now. All right. We'll talk to you again. We'll have another episode real soon. Thanks for listening. Hey, spread the word. Tell people go to silentgym.com. Tell them about this podcast. It's the only way that we pick up new listeners is when you spread the word. Thanks for doing that. Talk to you soon.